Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Q2 earnings is on August 7th for Palantir 2023. So before Q2, I wanted to do a little bit of a deep dive into what are the deals and the partnerships that were announced for Palantir over the past 3 months. Now, obviously, these aren't all the deals and partnerships that were announced, but it was everything that was public, at least. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to share my screen, read the headline, and then I'll give you like a quick kind of TLDR over what this headline meant at the time when I was thinking about it and what I think about it now. And we'll go through all of them. There's about 10 of them. I'll have timestamps in the video, but these are basically all the things, if you missed any of them, that you need to catch up on for what happened in the world of Palantir in the past 3 months before Q2. So the first press release we got on May 23rd, 2023 was CNA and Palantir develop a artificial intelligence model to optimize the product purchasing and inventory restocking process. This was a really interesting one for a couple of reasons. Number one, this was an international deal. So this was more around Latin America. And CNA is essentially an H&M that's not in America or like North America, Canada. It's more in Europe and Latin America. So they're a retailer for fashion. And so hoodies, pants, sweatshirts, all that stuff. They're using Palantir to be able to, and particularly AIP, to be able to figure out how can we know the repurchasing cycles? How can we know when to stock things, when to not stock things? How can we get real business intelligence that's in real time about understanding what things are selling, what things are not selling? And how can we create predictive models to figure out during certain times of the year what things are going to sell, what things are not going to sell? I thought this was a really good press release because it was one of the most basic companies in the world, right? You're selling clothes at the end of the day. You buy low, you sell high, and you make a profit. And they're finding a use case in Palantir's AIP to be able to kind of figure out how do we actually maximize the distribution that we have and ultimately our bottom line. So this was a really interesting one. The other thing this was interesting, this came about 16 days after Palantir's Q1 2023 results. And one of the things they lacked in Q1 was international growth. International CAGR, government and commercial, is like 10%. Like it's just not good. I mean, to be honest, the only reason we're GAAP profitable and we're going to continue to be GAAP profitable is because of US commercial. Hopefully that changes in the next quarter. We see a little bit more international growth, but this was a company that was international. So I think it was also a little bit on their side of being like, hey, we know our Q1 results for international wasn't the best, but here's a partnership with an international commercial company, commercial enterprise that we are trying to work with to be able to up our game in the commercial sector. And it was AIP, which was really good. Okay, another press release. May 25th, 2023, Palantir and Ministry of Digital Transformation of Ukraine strike the Reconstruction Partnership. Real quick from the press release, they are going to be enhancing the digital capabilities of electronic public services, providing defense and reconstruction of Ukraine, supporting and coordinating a digitally led reconstruction of Ukraine, consolidating the efforts in the fields of digitization, and promoting the implementation of projects with the support of the armed forces of Ukraine. This was one of the bigger partnerships we got in Q2, primarily because I believe that in the next 10 months, at least, this war will come to somewhat of an end, somewhat of a conclusion. Don't know how it's going to end, but it should be able to end. And hopefully Ukraine is Ukraine and Russia is Russia, and there is some level of negotiation over peace. If that's the case, Ukraine is going to have to reform itself. It's going to have to re-enter the global markets. It's going to have to rebuild its workforce. It's going to have to rebuild cities and buildings and digital infrastructure. And Palantir and the Ministry of Digital Transformation has the premier partnership to be able to get this job done. This made sense. Obviously, if Palantir software was first on the ground to be able to help Ukraine defend its sovereignty, then it only makes sense that to rebuild Ukraine, the data analytics platform you use to save your country from being overthrown, you use to help rebuild your country. Now, the interesting thing about this is that BlackRock and JP Morgan are setting up like I think it's like $100 billion fund in Ukraine. This came out in the Financial Times in June. And they're basically going to be allocating a ton of capital to projects in Ukraine because they see it as an investment opportunity because, you know, it's a brand new country that's kind of starting again from being a war-torn country. I think there's a world in which Palantir can snaggle up a little bit of that money because if they're working with the Ministry of Digital Transformation and they're rebuilding all these things from a digital infrastructure perspective, then hopefully some of that money can go to them. So I don't know what that deal is worth monetarily. What I do know is that to the Baltic states, to Lithuania, to Poland, to all these different things that are going on, Palantir not only defending Ukraine, but actually getting them back into the global markets by helping them reconstruct their entire country is nothing but good. From a monetary perspective, we'll see what happens, but that is one of those things that was announced in Q2, which was a really good deal. Next one, we've got Palantir announcing its live stream of a first AIPCon with AI demos and announcements from 25 customers. Now, this one was really, really important. This AIPCon, I think, was very good. AIP was announced just 2 months after ChatGPT came out, so this was kind of Palantir's version of how we're going to take on the AI market. You had Cisco presenting, you had Cleveland Clinic, you had Tampa Bay General Hospital, you had JD Power, you had all these really unique companies saying, hey, this is how we're using AIP. I mean, these are companies that are public. You know, Cisco's a $200-something billion company saying this is how we're using Apollo. Like, this was one of those conferences that was the thing they needed to do ASAP to be able to get people to understand what the value of AIP is. And on top of that, they're having AIP 2 in September in Palo Alto, which is going to be really, really exciting. So I think this was a highlight of Q2, and hopefully this is the conference where Alex Karp said we were getting 12 months worth of demand in 1 month. So hopefully this is one of those things where he's correct about this, and that results in more commercial clients in the second quarter. Okay, May 31st, 2023, we had the Jacobs and Palantir partnership extended. Jacobs is an engineering consulting company, so they work a lot with Palantir on being able to use Foundry as a data pipeline to be able to do all the optimization projects they do from an infrastructure perspective. Water infrastructure was one of the unique ways that Jacobs and Palantir particularly work together. So this one, makes a lot of sense to me. Jacobs and Palantir have had a long-standing relationship. They also presented at AIPCon. So it's one of those partnerships that you would want to see extended, especially because Jacobs is now using AIP. So it was one of those use cases where, like, all right, they were using Foundry. Foundry made sense. It was creating this data pipeline, and then Palantir went up to them and said, hey, AIP? And they're like, let's try it out. They tried it out. They're like, yeah, we'll present at your conference. This thing makes a lot of sense for us. So it was one of those premier partnerships that's going well for Palantir, and a partnership you want to see them continue to have over the next, hopefully, decade. Okay, January 5th, 2023, U.S. Special Operations Command awards contract to Palantir. Palantir got $463 million over a multi-year contract. I think it's 5 years. I might be wrong with this, but I think it's 5 years from the U.S. Special Operations Command. Look, I mean, this is just another governmental contract that Palantir is able to get, another governmental contract that Palantir really has very little competition to be able to get. Quote from Akash Jain, president of Palantir U.S. government, says, our partnership is an example of converting software innovation into real battlefield advantage. U.S. comms is at the forefront of adopting leading-edge technologies, and they're including advancements in large language models to reduce cognitive load on warfighters and commanders within the U.S. Special Operations Command. So $463 million, pretty big deal, and Palantir was able to get this contract. One more thing I'll say, because this wasn't a press release, is Palantir got $110 million from the U.S. Space Systems Command. 3 contracts, sole sourced, not single source. Single source means you have competition. Sole sourced means there is no competition. No one's bidding for those contracts. So Palantir got those $110 million split between 3 contracts from the U.S. Space Command back in June as well. Next partnership, Palantir launches Foundry for manufacturing on AWS to the broader market. So this was Palantir's extension of their commercial relationship with Amazon, and particularly AWS. Remember, Amazon is a cloud computing platform. Palantir is a data analytics platform. So that data analytics platform is agnostic to any cloud computing platform you use. So you can be used on Azure, GCP, AWS. It doesn't really matter. Now, AWS in general has like thousands and I would argue hundreds of thousands of clients, right? Because they are the biggest cloud computing platform in the world. So they have something called AWS Marketplace. So does Azure, so does GCP. And Palantir has worked with Amazon since like September 2021, where they really introduced like their official partnership to be able to offer Foundry on top of AWS. Now, for particular companies that are using AWS for manufacturing services, so you can imagine like a company that's building candles, right? And there's a very complex supply chain in order to build those candles. You actually have to manufacture them. There's a ton of data, especially if you're like one of the bigger candle companies in the world, that you have to integrate into some set of software to be able to operate all of that inventory, operate all of those operations in a way that makes sense. And so AWS allows you to host that data, but it doesn't really allow you to make sense of that data in a way that something like Palantir can do. So Palantir took their software and they basically gave it to Amazon Web Services for manufacturing. From the press release, it says, this integrated offering allows users to merge industrial data, decisions, and operations to fully harness manufacturing data through its entire lifecycle. Foundry brings data to life for manufacturing customers, offering a single environment to drive optimization and organizational change. So typical Foundry, typical Palantir data-driven insights and results brought to manufacturing clients on AWS. Essentially, AWS is a source of sales distribution for Palantir to get more clients. Next deal, June 7th, 2023. Palantir and Panasonic Energy of North America sign a multi year agreement. This was also a super, super big deal, primarily because the factory that Palantir was working at in Panasonic is in Sparks, Nevada. This is the same factory that is building batteries for Tesla. So as a result of it being the same factory that's building batteries for Tesla, it was really interesting because it's like, we know Palantir doesn't work with Tesla, but Palantir is optimizing a multi-year partnership to create a smart factory in the same one that's building the batteries for Nevada. So the factory that's being able to digitally transform their operations to be efficient for Tesla is using Palantir in order to be the best version that they could become. So it was just super interesting to see that partnership. If this partnership goes well, there's going to be another factory for Panasonic, which is the largest battery manufacturer in the world, in Wichita, Kansas, that's opening up in 2025. And Palantir will also be offering their services there as long as this operation within Sparks, Nevada goes well there. Now, Chief Information Officer Apina says, we engaged Palantir to assist on our journey towards a connected factory by addressing the challenges of disparate data systems and manual work around leading to an inaccurate data analysis. Within Foundry, we were able to operationalize our data and within months reduce waste through our manufacturing process over multiple use cases across functional groups. Foundry is assisting in driving operational excellence for Panasonic, empowering our people through accurate data-driven decision-making and delivering significant ROI per year. And we are just getting started. Now, this makes a lot of sense. If you are a battery manufacturing company, the level of operations and just entire variables you have to calculate, you need some type of system, some type of ontology, some type of smart factory in order for that to make sense, because there's just too much waste to be had, especially if you have this much demand and you're selling to these many clients and you've got Tesla that constantly needs batteries from you. You got to be able to deliver. And if Palantir helps you deliver, then that is a drop in the bucket in terms of pennies you're paying on the dollar to be able to ultimately get to your goal. So it makes sense that they're using Foundry and not something, like a competitor to Palantir, because they need the best data-driven suite of operations in order to be able to deliver to their clients. So this was a great deal for Panasonic and Palantir. Next one was June 29th. Palantir partners with Ukrainian tennis star Elena Svitvolina. Why was this really important? This was important because this was the first partnership Palantir has ever done, first sponsorship Palantir has ever done with a single athlete. I don't think Palantir would do this, and I quite frankly don't think it's useful of their money to sponsor any individual athlete. This person, though, Alina, is Ukrainian, and so that's why it makes a lot more sense. It's less about sponsoring LeBron James or anything like that. It's more about what significance does this athlete have if she wins or if she does really well at the highest level of sports. I think she got to like semifinals at some Wimbledon competition not a year ago, like a month ago. I'm really bad with sports when it comes to tennis, but this is she did actually really well, and she was sporting the Palantir logo, and she was quoted as saying, she wants to work with Palantir because she believes what they've been doing for Ukraine. So she says, I am thankful for the work they are doing in helping my government continue its fight to peacefully exit within our own borders. Palantir is helping that cause, and my decision to partner with them helps advance our humanitarian missions. So at the end of the day, she's like, look, these guys are protecting the sovereignty of the country that I'm, from. I can't be at that country because I'm an international sports tennis star, but my heart is with my country that's facing Russian aggression. And if Palantir is protecting them, then I would happily wear the Palantir logo. So it's one of those partnerships where I don't know what the ROI on that looks like, but I do think from a marketing perspective, if you want to get even more dollars out of Ukraine and countries that potentially could face some type of dictatorial assault on their sovereignty, being able to have your name on the beacon of sports excellence that comes from one of those countries, proudly saying you are the company, not the evil spy company, you are the company that's protecting freedom, liberty, democracy, and the pursuit of happiness within our nation. That's a big deal to me, and it makes sense. Even if it's not global recognition, at least in Ukraine, there is a better understanding of what Palantir is and why they are a special company to work with, and it fights back against the propaganda that exists with Palantir. Okay, we have about, how many more? We've got 3 more. Palantir expands partnership with Carashoft to deliver Apollo platform to the public sector. This was an extension of the partnership they had with Carashoft back in April 2022. Carashoft is just the middleman between IT companies and the government. So Carashoft takes their software, they use their system integrators, they repackage it, and then they resell it to the government. They take a little bit off the top in terms of a commission, but Palantir should hopefully be able to expand their sales, particularly around Apollo. That's something we have not heard about a lot at all. And so we've heard a lot about Foundry, lot about AIP, but Apollo doesn't get as much coverage. So Apollo being sold into the public sector, it is a very valuable thing from what I've understood and from the technical people I've talked to, but it's not as integrated into the public sector, basically governmental agencies. And so hopefully Carashoft is able to deliver more government contracts by selling Apollo into the government sector. Okay, Palantir and Toronto-based startup Airmatrix announced partnership. I did a video on this. This is a foundry for builders company, so nothing, you're not expecting massive revenue or upside. This is one of more of those crazy risks that Palantir wants to take, and for very little. I mean, it's foundry for builders. If anything, Airmatrix is probably paying them a little bit for the software. If not, then Palantir is probably just licensing to them for very little. And they're using it to try to be able to build and commercialize software for autonomous drone delivery from a governmental side and from a commercial side. So you think of Amazon, if they want to, sell bring a package to your house, they're going to use drones. They need to have a certain level of software to be able to manage that fleet of drones that's flying through the air. There's weather, there's all these crazy different variables you need to take into account. You put that into an ontology, you're able to better understand it. You mix that with what Airmatrix has done from a proprietary perspective on their software, and then boom, we got a pretty dope partnership. Can Airmatrix become a billion-dollar company? Maybe. You never know, but more likely than not, it's going to be a company that struggles very heavily, and if Palantir can help them struggle less, their odds of success are much greater. And so it's another risk that Palantir took with a foundry for builders company. And finally, Bloodhound Enterprise from Spectre Ops available to government agencies through Palantir's FedStart offering. Now, Palantir's made a big deal out of this idea that we have IL level 6 security clearance. There's billions of dollars being spent from venture capital in the private markets to defense technology companies, especially because of the geopolitical tensions we're having now worldwide. And those defense technology companies can't make any money if they can't sell to the government. In order to sell to the government, you have to have a certain level of accreditation to be able to even access government deals. Palantir's like, hey, we can give you the accreditation. You give us a little bit of margin, we're going to be able to help your product get into the government because we've done 20 years of lobbying and political networking to get IL level 6 accreditation, and we have the technical capabilities to deliver on that. And then boom, there you go. We are going to be able to allow you to take some of that money you raised, you pay us a little bit, and you actually have a chance to sell to the government. Spectre Ops Bloodhound Enterprise is a cybersecurity software that's specifically trying to attack AD pathway attacks. And so in order for them to sell to the government, they need some level of essentially accreditation on their software, and they have none of that. They just raised $33 million, right? They don't have IL level 4, 5, or 6. Palantir does. And so Palantir can basically be an on-ramp for them to be able to get IL level 5 within a matter of weeks is what they're saying, or to be able to use their software within Palantir's container is what Palantir calls it, and then try to sell that into the government. So those were pretty much all the deals that happened in the world of Palantir over the past 3 months. A couple of other things that happened. Alex Karp gave a bunch of interviews. Sham Sanker gave some interviews. Novartis CEO, big pharmaceutical company, went on CNBC, said, we love using Palantir. That was really important. Palantir talked with Joe Lonsdale. That was really important. Palantir tripled their stake in Lilium, which is one of their SPACs. They're probably down like 80% on that position, but they went from 400,000 shares to 1.4 million shares. So they bought more shares of Lilium. Maybe they see a little bit more upside in Lilium. They acquired a bunch of shares from Rubicon Technologies. I believe not because they bought it, but because Rubicon couldn't do some financial obligations for them. So in order to pay them, they just gave them more equity, kind of like bartering their shares. That actually Rubicon stock went up a lot because of that, but I don't think it's because Palantir bought it. It's just because Palantir had to be able to get those shares for the work that Rubicon was not able to pay for. And on top of that, I think that's pretty much it. Those were the main things that happened. Trying to think if there's any other private... Oh, Palantir created a regional tech hub in Lithuania as well. That was something that went a little bit under the radar. And also Palantir got a $31 million contract to transfer data from certain parts of the NHS to other parts of the NHS, leading us to believe that Palantir is getting this NHS deal. Alex Karp and Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister of the NHS, or of the UK, met in a baseball game in Washington, D.C. to talk about hot dogs, of course, I guess, like we're talking about the NHS. And Palantir made the UK an official AI headquarters for their company, which makes sense why you're doing it in the UK, because you want to build good relations in the UK. So those were all the things that happened in Q1 or Q2. Let me know if I missed anything. Excited for Q2 earnings. We'll see what happens, and we'll see how the numbers look like as Q2 comes out. But those are all of the big press releases that happened. And now you're caught up if you listen to 19 minutes of this. And now you know everything that happened in Q2 for 2023. Thank you guys so much for listening and watching. Please make sure to subscribe to dailypalantir.com/subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.